What is your ability? Understanding what your ability is as a leader, looking around you and saying, I need to learn that from that individual. One of the hardest things I found was if you then didn't come across the situation again, actually, had you learned? You've gone through the process of learning, but until you meet it again, actually, did you learn? Did you genuinely learn? So, and that's why I find that one of the major changes I've found leadership-wise in the Air Force that had the most positive aspect from my perspective in the Royal Air Force was they started what they call General Service Training 1 and General Service Training 2. General Service Training 1 was bringing people in a non-leadership role into that leadership role, i.e. at corporal level, substantive corporals. They like the police were acting corporals because the rank just gave them that view of I'm the boss, but they had to go through a course. So the GST1 course for substantive promotion corporal and GST2, which was substantive promotion to sergeant, which is your third strike. That gave us a basis going forward of when somebody arrived on your unit who had done GST1 or done GST2, you could rely on the basis of the fact that they know what their basic role is in that rank or in that position within the leadership chain.
Hello, welcome to the 200th episode of Leading with Integrity. It's hard to believe it, but we are finally there. 4 years, 200 episodes, hundreds of guests, thousands of hours. And for this very special episode, I wanted to do something very special to mark that milestone. I must confess, I racked my brains for a while, trying to think of the best way to do this. And in the end, what I settled upon was this. I talk a lot about mentoring, mentorship, the power of coaching, and all of these things in the world of leadership and how it can help you be a better leader, a more effective one. So I had the idea, what about interviewing someone who has been a mentor to me? So the audience can get a bit of a sense about why my view on leadership is the way it is, what put some of those experiences that I've hinted at in the past into context, but also give you the opportunity to learn from them as much as I have, or at least a little bit as much as I have. So in that vein, I'm very, very pleased to welcome someone who I've known for nearly 15 years. We worked together. We met at a time in my career where I wasn't always that happy, and his influence, his presence often really helped me break out of a quite negative spiral. I've learned loads from him. He was a guest at my wedding. We meet up at least once or twice a year, even though we live hours and hours away from each other. His name is Stuart Vincent, or Stu for short. We may also know him as Rick. He's got a few names. He's kind of like one of those mythical creatures, but not really. I'm sure he won't mind me saying that, probably. Anyway, so we'll be hearing today about his career story from 38 years in the Royal Air Force as an aircraft engineer, the second career he had when he retired from the Air Force, which is when he and I met and had the opportunity to work together for a few years, and then up to his second retirement. I guess there might be a third in the future, I don't know. I'll leave that to him to answer. Because we are in a very special episode, because this is the 200th, I'm not going to plug anything. I'm not going to advertise anything. I'm not going to ask you to do anything. I will, of course, include the website link at the end if you're interested. But there's no pressure. I just want you to listen, enjoy, hopefully learn a bit from Stu's experiences. So without further ado, please welcome my mentor, my former colleague, my friend, Stuart Vincent.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
Well, Stu, welcome to the podcast. It's been a long time coming. I've had this idea in the back of my head for years now to get you on here, and I'm glad we've finally done it. So welcome.
Yeah. Yes. Pleased to be here.
I obviously know you pretty well now after, what is it, nearly 15 years.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, the listeners, the viewers won't know anything about you at all. So to kick us off, in a nutshell, give us a bit of an overview of your career, you know, what you've been doing for the last 10 years or so as well, and so on, as much as you like or don't want to talk about, you know, it's up to you.
Okay, then. Well, I originally wanted to join the Merchant Navy, and I went to the Liver Building in Liverpool to do the exams and everything else, passed all of those. It was all going to do it. I was going to be a marine engineer. I was looking forward to traveling the world. But then it came to the point where my color blindness came a point, and they said, "Oh, it's all right, no problem. You're gonna be down below. You won't be a that'll be fine." And then I was just about to start my training. I was 16 and a half. I was going to carry on with education there. It's one of those, what they call now, what was it? Gold apprenticeships or something. In our days, it was just an apprenticeship. But yeah. Anyway, but the color blindness in the end, the answer was no. So I offloaded this training item at Chatham Docks, walked down the road, and the first place I came to was the RAF CIO. And I thought, well, my dad has had a good life in the Air Force, or still in the Air Force. And I'd had a great childhood. So I thought, well, I'll give it a crack. Went in, took the exams, did the medical. There was only 2 trades I could join, which was airframes and engines. I went for airframes, and I went, great, lovely. He said, well, here's a travel thing. He said 2 weeks' time. He said, well, I just said to him, can you find anywhere I can stay cheap for a couple of weeks? And he said, why is that? I said, well, my parents are stationed, my father's stationed out in Cyprus. I flew in from Cyprus to start my training. And he went, right, come back at 5 o'clock. And he took me home, and I stayed with him first 2 weeks, which was amazing. And then, as I said, did my training, basic square bashing at Swinderby, then on to 4SATT at St Athens. Went from what they call a trade assistant general, a tag, to a leading aircraftsman, LAC. Then I did SAC. And journey technician. Journey technician was a big jump because that was a year-long course, quite intense. Then came out of there, then started doing my stuff, managed to get to corporal, sergeant, chief tech, flight sergeant, and then I finished my career as a warrant officer. So multiple aircraft types. I define the aircraft types in aircraft I actually turned a spanner on, as opposed to just waving bats and doing first line maintenance. And that's 24, 25 different aircraft types. And I served on 19, 20 units where I was there for 9 months or more. Lots of other little places where you dipped in and dipped out. But yeah, so really that was it. I joined in 1970 and I left in 2007, December 2007. So yeah, I had a great time. And after that, I started with a company doing aircraft related work, and then stumbled across you guys, ended up starting my own company, Vincent Aerotech Limited, and then multiple places with you guys. Canada was the first job I think I got sent on. Then it was all over UK, Europe, even to the point of ending up in Libya, which was a bit of a shock to me, but never mind. Being there as a child back before Gaddafi days, so at least I knew what the place looked like. But no, so yeah, great times, great service. Recommend it to anybody. Even though people will say it's not what it was, well, I don't think any career, any job that you start, as things change. I mean, when I started, there was what was a mobile phone? I mean, it didn't exist, did it? So definitely, I'd recommend the forces to anybody who's a little bit lost in life, shall I say? That's how's that for a little summary? Okay.
Yeah, not bad. Yeah, you touched on all the main points, didn't you? Yeah. I mean, as far as like things not being the same, I mean, the first clue is the recruiting officer letting you stay at his house. Like, that would never in a million years happen today.
No, it's just amazing. Yeah.
They'd be terrified of, all sorts of things, I imagine, these days.
Well, I grew up in the world where if you were out and about and you were in trouble, you knocked on the first door with lights on and asked for help. Whether you would do that today, I'm not sure, but
I don't know. I guess it depends where you are. Like, around here, I probably would. Yeah. But then I live here, so I wouldn't need to, I suppose.
no, and you're out of nappies. You're okay. You're good. You're
true.
in the adult world, dear boy. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's fair. Yes, and the Libya one, I think we were all a bit surprised by that at the time.
yeah. And it, as I said, we got involved with some, as a company, with some stuff that we well, as I said, it was just amazing. It really was. It was amazing times.
I'm trying not to geek out too much on the aircraft stuff because I feel like we might lose people if we do that.
I know, I understand.
But I mean, there was some really interesting aircraft going around Libya as well, which some of those photos from some of the trips. In a way, I was glad I didn't go on the trip, but in another way, felt like I missed out a little bit.
Well, going to bed with your go bag beside you was, and knowing which window you were going to get out of and what roof you were going to run across to get to the car parked 4 streets away. Yeah, that was the
that's the bit I'm not sorry I missed. Yeah. You've given us a great overview, a great snapshot there. So really my first question now is, if you had to pick like a handful, I mean, I've said 3, but it'll probably be 3 or 4 or 5 or, whatever, but your like top career highlights that really stand out to you, that, the things that were, I mean, everyone has those sort of moments, I think, in life, in work, where they look back on it like, I'm really glad I did that. I'm really glad I had that chance and that opportunity. What would those be for you?
From the leadership aspect, I would say putting my corporal's tapes up. The position then within my engineering world became very broad as a corporal. You even to the point where you could end up as orderly corporal at night in the guard room at a unit. And if everybody else is asleep, you're the guy on the desk, you're in charge. So it was that progress, I think, remembering I'm in the non-commissioned side, from joining as a tag and then eventually ending up as a corporal. That was one, I'll always remember that first realization of the responsibilities you now have, not just to yourself, but to other people. That was probably, and this infrastructure around you as well, whereas coming through to, AC, LAC, SAC, it was all about you. It was all about working hard to progress yourself forward. But when somebody then recognized that and got you to corporal, that's probably one major event. The other one, I think, was I was a chief technician working at RAF Abingdon, and there was a job going in the support authority office at High Wycombe. The flight lieutenant in there at the time had been one of my old bosses, and I got a call saying, why didn't you have a crack at trying to go for this job, which was a paper and pen job as opposed to a spannering job. But it was all on the regulatory side, the safety aspects, all those sorts of things. I went along for the interview, and I think the biggest change was when I got accepted for the job and I ended up in the office. And the office, there was the squadron leader, the flight lieutenant, and myself. I think that was when WordPerfect, 386 laptops, when the Chinograph board on the wall that we ran the fleet on, 100 and plus odd aircraft, we ran the fleet on a Chinograph board, all of a sudden became electronic and stuff like that. So those aspects, working closely with a senior and effectively what they call a junior officer, both senior in experience as far as I was concerned, that was another moment. I learned so much from sitting in the same office as those two. And from that experience, as I went up the rank structure, I applied the working from what they call the hang up from the floor, as opposed to from an office. I think being a leader, getting yourself out there in amongst what's going on, so you're not picking up everything secondhand. You're able to see it yourself, as opposed to somebody else's opinion of what's happened, etc. You're then steered more by what's factually going on. And I believe some of the more successful companies I worked with when I left the Air Force were companies where they had a floor full of people working. The old classic, there's no I in team. They were a team. Not necessarily the bosses sat at the top in an office or anything. They were just in random desks around. And that's the bit that I applied when I got the opportunity, as I went up through then from chief tech to flight sergeant and then into being a warrant officer, that leadership from the floor worked best for me. So those are my three or four. There's lots. I don't want to bore anybody, but they tend to towards the aircraft structure side of stuff, and running a multi-million-pound wing change team on the Hawk aircraft. But I was the interface between the MOD and BAE, i.e. the roll office at Whitton, and I was the guy on the ground. Again, leadership from the floor as opposed to an office on the end of a phone. So yeah, lots of things. But yeah. Hopefully that works for you.
Yeah. No, it's your story, and you're free to choose. So yeah, as long as it works for you, that's the thing. I mean, that kind of leading from the floor bit is really interesting as well. I think it's a balance, isn't it? Like the bigger your team or the organization you work for or that you lead, the more difficult that gets. And there's some interesting examples even in like recent history of corporate governance and things about there's like really famous names who have done that really well. And then a couple of others who maybe didn't, and the financial results that their companies did or didn't achieve as a result. But it is I think when you're doing a role like that where there is hands-on work, like there's engineering or there's software development or there's like customer facing in retail, that sort of thing, it can be a lot more difficult to do that then when leadership literally like gets physically removed from the situation and it's in head office or whatever. But I think the principle is always there. It's always sound. Like even if you can't go and turn the spanner, to use your phrase, yourself, you can at least go and talk to the people who are and listen to what challenges they're facing. And I think the leaders I've seen go wrong over the years are the ones who lost the ability or the inclination to do that. And they end up in an echo chamber where it's just their opinions and opinions of people like them. And they're never hearing from the people who are actually on the ground at the coalface, whichever analogy you prefer, that one. And you can see it in their decisions because you're like, well, you clearly don't know this or that because you haven't asked.
One of the things for me within the general scope of leadership is that if all you're doing is hearing echoes of yourself, that's number one route to failure, in my opinion. One of the hardest things for me is that 9 times out of 10, the mainest constraint for me, as opposed to somebody leading within business, from my perspective, majority of the time, it was time. How many hours have we got? Truly understanding what the output was and what objective that output was leading towards. And if you didn't know the output, yes, we've got to have 15 aircraft on the line in the morning by 9:30, so many sorties a day, all this sort of stuff. Looking at your prior planning, your resourcing, etc., etc. But what was the objective of having them there? Because that could drive the fact that, they want the squadron boss asked for 15 aircraft on the line, but he only actually needs 9. So you plow resources into getting the 15 out there. You ask people to work, their shifts ended but I need 4 more hours out of you. I need somebody to jump in a van and drive down to a maintenance unit and grab some bits that would take 3 days to get to us, but he could do it in 16 hours. So you start making all those decisions. So one of the things I learned very, very quickly was whoever was giving me the order, I then got to the decisions where, and in some respects, I with certain individuals, it was, yeah, your forthright manner at times can be a little bit disturbing, disrupting rather, because I'll go and say, boss, we know you don't need 15. You've only got 9 pilots under training at the moment. The other guys don't arrive till next week. I can give you 10 airframes in really good nick, really good condition, that will do your 4 or 5 sorties that you need them to do that day. If I give you 15, half of them will go US because I haven't got the stuff to make them reliable. So it's that sort of thing. So my drivers weren't necessarily the financial success, but it was the output success of the leadership decisions which drove my world, really. And I think at times, I'm not dismissing the finance bit, because that's the difference in the public sector, right? At the level I was at, on the non-commissioned side, on the commission side, especially from wing commander and above, they were driven by, they had to do, I started to learn about cost benefit analysis and all sorts of things, and risk evaluation, all those sorts of things. When I got into my 1 officer rank, where I had to deal with money a little bit more, I got this amount of money for a contract. You've got to do it in that time and in that finance. But I think one of the main drivers for me was what was my ability, what experience that I got, and what flexibility I had in applying that to what was needed. And that's one of my main drivers I found in my leadership roles was flexibility. Leadership for me is a knowledge thing. I don't want to drift off too far from what.
No, so that's interesting. I mean, so you're talking around, and I mean, just thinking back to how and why we met, and you're talking about like cost benefit analysis and your story with how many aircraft are really needed versus all of that. And it always reminds me of this, and this has come up recently actually with someone I was talking to the other day. You remember that sort of that cliche around you can have it like cheap, you can have it done well, or you can have it quickly. Pick 2. You can never have all 3. And that one's always stuck in my memory. And it just makes me laugh every time I think of it, because it's so true. Like, we've all had those kind of situations, or those sort of leaders, bosses, dare I say, who are maybe a little bit removed from the reality of the situation. They're demanding all 3 of these things when only 2 are possible. And, it reminded me of that as you were telling that story.
One of the things I started to make myself do was that when I started to get decision making from above down to me, and it was out of step with the normal thing that we were getting, and I would start questioning, saying, "Okay," think to myself, "Okay, then, boss, what?" Because as a warrant officer, everybody above you calls you Mister, and everybody below you calls you Sir. It is. If you want to have a leadership role, it's brilliant. But when you start questioning what's coming down for you to implement, sometimes it's having, in the nicest way, the gumption to find out what's driving the boss to make the decision that he's making. And the best bosses I worked with within the leadership role were those who were prepared to be flexible and give you the knowledge you needed to understand why you were being asked to do what you were doing. And I found that pushing that upwards created a better situation for me in the position I had as the individual with the experience, and to get that done for them. But it was understanding what was driving it. Because you turn around and you say, why wouldn't we doing it that way? And that's the old saying is 1,000 ways to skin a cat. And if all they want is the cat skinned, well, that's fine. But if it's taken them 9 months to do it, it ain't going to work. So, you've got to know what all the aspects are and make your decision that way. Welding the team into one, making the team the classic, there's no I in team. So you end up with at times, a singular target that the team can focus on. While they're focusing on that and getting that done, you can then pull, like I would have pulled to say a couple of corporals or a sergeant or a chief out of that environment and say, right, and then start developing within them the leadership was needed to take it to the next step. Right. And so that you didn't have to put the whole thing out there at once. You could compartmentalize it because you knew the task was just too big to put out there. And you also needed to add a little bit more understanding and sometimes training, sometimes literally getting the book and going, Steve, go and read that. You've got to understand that for the next step. But he couldn't do that while he was involved in doing the job. Does that make sense? So that's another thing.
Yeah, it does. It does. And it's a theme I hear from pretty much every industry and most levels of leadership, whether from like first-time supervisor in a supermarket or whatever, right the way up to like, I don't know, politician or whatever. But it's the ones who are really good at it. And it's about communication, I think, at the end of the day, in that kind of leader to follower direction. It's about like, what are the actual outputs we're looking for? And then once you understand and you've defined those, making those the only thing you really care about as a leader. Because when I say that, within reason, obviously care about the people, that's the other primary one. But I'm talking about it in terms of more of a management sense almost, because it's very easy as a manager, as a leader, to get fixated on the wrong things. So like the classic one, I guess, is time, isn't it? Like, I need this by tomorrow, even though you don't need it till next week. Or you fixate on time spent even, as opposed to deadline. But like, why are you only spending 2 hours on this? That's not what you're paid for. You're paid to be here 9 to 5. That's what I expect you to do. And that's not about the outputs. All you really should be caring about in this context as a leader or as a manager is the job getting done? And is it meeting the quality requirement? Is it meeting the deliverables, the deadlines, whatever? And if that's all you care about, then the rest of it doesn't matter. And I think this is where we're sort of seeing a shift in modern leadership as well, from that sort of clock watching mentality to an output watching one, where actually it's just, here's what I need, here's the tools you can use to do it, here's information, here's where I'll be if you need further input or guidance. Just let me know when it's done. I don't care how you do it, when you do it, what hours you work, how long it takes you. As long as it's done, I'm happy.
Yeah, having been in that situation, you then end up at sometimes, if you're not careful, with no team left because you've destroyed your team in just applying that approach to getting the job done. And I think understanding, respect, trying to link everything together, and really be top of the pile on coordination.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding your resources, understanding who's got the skill set. And if you find in doing tasking over a period of time, you end up funneling people down these lines because all that you're focusing on is your success in front of those above or outside of you. And you lose sight of the fact that if one element of that team fell over, the job stops. Because nobody's cross-fertilizing, nobody's understanding what's needed. I think one of the classic things for me was probably the first, my last soiree abroad in the forces was to Iraq on the Joint Helicopter Force. I think the first convoy we had to put together to go to one of our forward operating bases. And the guys were using their language. Said, what do you mean by the bullet man? What's the bullet man? And they said, boss, it's obvious, isn't it? And they just pointed at the fuel bowser. And yeah, it's quite right. So I said, well, what do you do about it? He says, well, we make sure we go there. And they carried pockets, literally, I'm not joking, miniature little claw hammers and pockets of corks. And as we were going along the road, 9 times, even when they used certain rounds, they just went straight through. So we would go for so far, then we'd be a safe spot all over it. They come out, wang the corks in and literally get to the end, download everything, up to, we'd all breathe a sigh of relief, have a sleep, and then drive back the next day and virtually not stop once, because they knew it was just us in there. There was nothing worthwhile there. We had, excuse my French, loads of ammunition and no fuel, no nothing. So there was nothing to steal. So you just driving there was a nightmare. Getting back was dead easy. And it's how do you adapt that? I had a corporal who was awesome at organising things, because they ran it. And no matter what rank was on it, they ran the convoy. They did the stuff. And I got to the stage, I thought, hang on, we've got to stop this. So I pulled him off and put him at the end on the phone, the radio phone to everybody. And he ran it from a distance, training the guys to do the work. Because we had a single point of failure. And if anything happened to him, we were buggered. So that's where I'm coming from with that side of that side.
Yeah. I mean, I guess what I was saying before, the caveats, of course, are you're assuming there's a minimum level of training, aren't you? But yeah, I mean, that story with the corks, that to me, like, not to get all patriotic and misty-eyed about it, but that's like the classic example to me of why the British forces have always been famous for like their ability to improvise and innovate and think creatively. Because that is like a dead simple solution to a really big problem that someone just sort of went, oh, what if I... Brilliant.
I think the first one they did, they ended up tearing the passenger seat in the Land Rover Park, because that had a wooden back to it, and literally with a sharp knife, and they were making wooden pegs to bang in the things. But the joke apart, we ended up getting sorted. I mean, the method of what is your ability, understanding what your ability is as a leader, looking around you and saying, I need to learn that from that individual. One of the hardest things I found was, if you then didn't come across the situation again, actually, had you learned? You've gone through the process of learning, but until you meet it again, actually, did you learn? Did you genuinely learn? So, and that's why I find that one of the major changes I've found leadership-wise, the Air Force had the most positive aspect from my perspective in the Royal Air Force was they started what they call General Service Training 1 and General Service Training 2. General Service Training 1 was bringing people in a non-leadership role into that leadership role, i.e. at corporal level, substantive corporals. They like the police were acting corporals because the rank just gave them that view of I'm the boss, but they had to go through a course. So the GST1 course for substantive promotion corporal, and GST2, which was substantive promotion to sergeant, which is your third strike. That gave us a basis going forward of when somebody arrived on your unit who had done GST1 or done GST2, you could rely on the basis of the fact that they know what their basic role is in that rank or in that position within the leadership chain. And that made a huge difference.
A story, like you must be like you're definitely the first RAF veteran I've had on the show. Potentially the first Brit. I had quite a few Americans and a couple of Aussies who were veterans who'd served in various branches. And the story I hear, I mean, there's two when it comes to like leadership development and training. We'll come to the other one a bit later, I think. But this first one, I think, is something that you don't really see in the private sector or in the corporate environment because nobody really does it. But it's that having the development and the training up to like a common standard, whereby if someone's in a role, you can trust they know at least a minimum baseline of something, and that everyone who's done that training or is in that level of role will have had the same training and have that same baseline. And you never see that in corporate. Like in big multinational, like thousands of people companies, yeah, maybe if they've got a good internal learning and development department, which isn't a given. It's interesting to me because it's one of those things that, especially with the focus in a lot of these businesses and companies about like common output and standardization and that sort of take on it, you would think it would be a no-brainer then to also have common level of training. But apparently not. And I don't know if it's just people don't want to spend the money on it because they see training as expensive in inverted commas, or if it's just never been enough of a need to bother doing it. But it's a puzzle for me.
Yeah, the bit of the puzzle there was when they say, as you said, when you did the cost aspect of it, but what somebody had done when they started on the GST1, GST2 route, was somebody had worked out that we can't afford not to do it. Because as the force, when I joined up, there was 125,000 people in the Royal Air Force. When I left, I think it was close to probably 40. I think it's down to 31 now. The aspect also that the number of aircraft types has shrunk. You have people going out to aircraft now with laptops, plugging them in, blah, 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 all this. So the changes are huge. But what wasn't changing was the development at my level, at the non-commissioned level, that core development. On the commissioned side, you know, they had the courses, they had the follow-on leadership courses, etc., etc. But on the non-commissioned side, they didn't. So one of the best things for me was GST1, GST2. It was a real pain in the proverbial at times, however. And there were people, to be fair, who came on my experience on GST1. I had one guy in particular, he came on the course, and I could see that he just didn't want to be there. So I took him to one side and chat with him. What's the problem? I said, I enjoy my job. I enjoy being a JT. The guy was nearly 40. You know, and he was hugely experienced, a natural leader in all aspects, but he didn't want the formal position. He just didn't want it. So I gave him a way out so that he could return to his unit in a positive way, as opposed to you failed the course, you kicked off, you're done. None of that. So that to me as well at times is, you've chosen an individual to move to this position. Do they actually want it?
Yeah.
Some of the drivers for individuals is they'll take it because it's more money. 9 times out of 10, that's it. Nothing else. So you reap what you sow, in my opinion, in recruitment. One of my experience as a contractor, once I'd left the Air Force, was because of my knowledge and my legacy knowledge of certain engineering aspects, principles, aircraft types, etc., the companies I was being contracted to didn't want to spend the money on something that was going to disappear over the next 3 or 4 years. That made sense. Sense. But what I experienced was that people were then latching on to me, and I ended up training them on their aircraft types that they were going to be left with, because they'd never viewed the wider aspects of controlling, understanding, being flexible. And if they'd have all been a bit more flexible and a bit more understanding, heaven forbid, I would never have been subcontracted into their world, because they had the knowledge, to be fair. It was already there. And if you 9 times out of 10 with process, you could take the title of, I don't know, Hawk out and put any aircraft you like in, because the principles of flight don't change. You know, the fact that the only carriage has got to come down to land, all those sorts of things, it doesn't change. You know, So yeah, I hear what you say about the finance side, but you can stovepipe if you're not careful because of that.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I'm by no means agreeing with that approach. I fear that's the reality, and I think it's one of those things, like especially the last few years, where things have been difficult economically and politically, and because of pandemics and things like that. You tend to see the first 2 or 3 things that get cut or reduced will be training and development, and weirdly marketing, which I never quite understood, because that's the beginning of your sales pipeline. So
Yeah, well,
if you're running out of cash, that seems like the last thing you should stop. But maybe, yeah, there's obviously something there I don't understand well enough to comment, but it's an interesting one.
yeah. You see that I find what you're saying there really interesting, because I do you know, I know that the pandemic, it all affected people in different ways, but I know what it did to us as a family. We suddenly realised, and this is where my kids ended up leading me actually on a better path. Was, yeah, but Dad, we can't control that. We know what the output is of not being able to control it. So what we have to do is just manage that output into a positive aspect. And I think one of the things as a leader you've got to be careful of is that we can spend hours and hours and hours in a swimming pool of negativity, swimming around all day. And it has a really detrimental effect. One of the things about, we get together for a barbie on a Sunday afternoon or whatever it is, they all want to have a little release about their jobs and various things and stuff like that. But in the end, it always ends up with us all being on a positive note. So the last words are always positive about things, because otherwise, as a leader, if you have that aura of negativity, it's really hard. I worked for one guy with that, and he was the only senior officer in my experience who had a nickname, a negative nickname, and it was SBS was his nickname, and he loved it. He thought it was brilliant. He was part of the team, SBS, blah blah blah. You know, it actually meant, and apologies for this, small, bald, and Scottish, and he was the wrong person in the wrong job with the wrong people. It was, yeah. But, and that's where I'm coming from. It's if you end up with that negative vibe all the time, very rarely was anything right. Very rarely was it done. There was always something to find. And you can do that in any environment, find out the negative aspects. But I believe as a leader, it's understanding what's negative, controlling as best you can, but focusing on the positives.
I do agree. I think there's an element there of like the culture of the organization about where you are, what the context is of where you're working. Like, I mean, I've had periods in my career where you probably know because you were there at the same time, where I was going into that negative spiral. And I look back at it now and I'm like, if I was leading David then, I would have given him the sack because he was damaging the culture for whatever reason. And people around him were probably feeling a bit negative because of the way he was putting it out there. But when you're in that, it's so difficult to recognize it in yourself and then break out of it and do something about it, especially if you're in a context where your leadership, I'm not saying this is the case for that example I've given, but I've seen it with others since. If you're in that, it's sort of what we were saying about an echo chamber earlier as well, but it becomes like that downward spiral, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Where you all start to feed off each other's negativity. And if the leadership is also a bit negative or not happy with things, or they're taking out their frustrations on people or whatever, that's where toxic cultures get born. And I think that's also why it gets so difficult. I mean, another strange analogy is like that, the game of tennis, where you've just got the negative ball of energy going backwards and forwards and people are batting it between themselves. And once you get into that, and this is why I think toxic culture is A, such a big problem, and B, so difficult to resolve without making a drastic change to personnel. And it's easy to blame the leader all the time, particularly if you're working for a leader that you don't get on with and you feel they are the negative presence. But, it takes two to tango, as they say.
Very much so. And I one of the experiences in my time was they had these like away days when you all went off to some hotel somewhere and you ended up with whiteboards and IT and also, and you sat around and you all had these nice little chats and all the other bits and pieces, and all anybody was really interested in is what time's the bar opening, what time's the evening meal, and are we going out tonight, and all those sorts of things. And the actual purpose, the main purpose for them, for me, was at the end of the day, we came away all a lot happier. We'd had a chance to vent stuff and various things, but I don't think the output was achieved, apart from the fact that everybody came back a little bit happier, I suppose. I don't know, but there's
I know what you're saying. I'm trying to think of an away day thing I've ever been to that was good and productive and ended with something that actually had a long-lasting effect, and I can't think of one. And I think so often in the corporate world, those are done as like a last-minute sticking plaster when someone has finally realised, oh, crap, we've got a problem here, we better do something. I know, let's do an off-site and then we'll give them a free dinner at the end or whatever, and everyone will be happy again. I think I've heard stories of other companies that I haven't worked at where they take a completely different approach to this. And actually for them, an away day is a quarterly thing. And it becomes part of their planning process and their ongoing strategy. And then they have the social bit at the end as well, because you want to build those connections and internal networks between team members, and you want to have different, more relaxed environments. And it doesn't have to be about the booze either.
No.
Oh, there's a guy I've had on the podcast a few times now, and his whole specialism is staff retention and keeping people engaged. And he's got this real bee in his bonnet, and he has for years, about Christmas parties and how actually they can be the worst, most damaging thing for your culture and your team, because all you do is let everyone go out and get drunk on the company's dime, which is pretty expensive, but also all you do is create the potential for something really embarrassing and painful to happen, when instead you could be using it as an away session or an actual genuine team building event, instead of the team building in inverted commas where there's alcohol involved.
I can honestly say the adventure training ones that I did were phenomenal. People being able to, well, I can't do that, and then finding out that they could. The problem I found with the party influence, as you said, the Christmas party, is you all end up in little lumps and little groups anyway. Nobody's interacting. You're only chatting with the people you know, and nobody's really cross-fertilizing or whatever. I think the adventure training ones were probably, I could say, were the most positive aspects towards developing the team, and then helping you to focus as a leader on it, especially when you when you go on adventure training and you find that the person that's going to be leading you for the day is the one person you would at work you would never have in charge. But put that person in a certain environment, halfway up a mountain, somebody twists their ankle or does whatever, and just watch them click, bang, come in and just amaze you about their organization, their the whole aspect of how they approach themselves. Get back to work and then find what the key is to develop that at work, and you then end up with an even stronger team. And that's the best aspect I found out about the adventure training side of it. Was, as I said, my experience of that individual, I'd never give a leadership role in as long as tea in China. Just proved, well, it was her actually, proved herself to be brilliant, absolutely superb.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I feel like those I've probably been that person at some point in my career. We probably all have in our lives. It's a confidence thing a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And so going into that completely separate, different, opposite almost like context and situation, the confidence becomes less of an issue, because it's less about like, I don't know if I can do this bit at work because it's not at work. And there's like that switch in your brain. You're like, actually, nobody else around here is going to be any better at this than I am, so I might as well give it a go. And then you surprise yourself. As you say, the trick is then when you get back to work, is remembering that switch was there and then helping them build on it.
One of the things I found as well, especially when I got to warrant officer, was getting to know people, not formally across a desk or whatever, but just listening to a conversation in the crew room over a cup of coffee and getting to the point where people relaxed around you and didn't feel like you were testing them or doing whatever. And I found understanding what they did in their downtime, what their hobbies were, what's I don't know, sports, etc., but what their downtime, what they did with their downtime again. I remember we were going through a major revamp. I was a contractor at the time, and there was huge changes, regulatory changes coming along, etc. And we were struggling to get on top of everything. And one of the guys I was working with said, "Oh, blah blah." So he's a readaholic. He reads everything, and he can quote a book he read you 15 years ago, virtually page, paragraph, blah blah blah. We found that individual, brought him into the team, and boy, did the team click after that. But he never had that opportunity within his technical role to do. But we brought him in as the fact finder. He was amazing, and that comes from what he enjoyed doing socially. So there's another.
Yeah, it's going beyond the superficial, isn't it? And getting to know people and like recognizing what makes them individuals. And I think, again, it's a common mistake, isn't it? Is you have to be able to look beyond just what you know of them at work, or the flip side of it. You need to understand there is a whole person there. It's not just about what they're doing when you see them. And
doing it in a manner which is not intrusive, which Absolutely. Is not judgmental or whatever. It's and one of the things I enjoyed most coming through the ranks, as I did, was being given that opportunity to mature, to be mature, and then get to that position in the end and say, right, go on, Vincent, what actually have you learned? How capable actually are you? And I go back a bit, but one of the defining moments again for me, one of the things was I'd never been in a true leadership role in a combat environment. Right, I'd always been led up to that point. When I ended up on the Joint Helicopter Force with the role I had as Eng 4, I came back from that. Actually, I had to do 2 back-to-back tours because they couldn't find anybody to replace me at the time. But I came back, and when I actually got home and I sat down and just chilled out and started to relax about it all, I had the biggest smile on my face, internally, externally, and everything else, because I proved to myself that I could do it. I think that's another thing as well in the leadership role is if you get too comfortable where you are you leading or are you being just led by the circumstances, by the money, by this, by that? You're just being led, or are you actually truly applying who you are as a leader? And I think that's, given that opportunity, I think was amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah, that's quite a deep question, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
One for everyone to ponder, I think, in the audience as well.
Possibly, yeah.
Changing topic slightly, but not really. Something else that I hear from quite a few ex-forces personnel is about this. So there's a perception, I think, from like the war movie and the Hollywood kind of perception of what the forces are like, that it's all about that sort of autocratic leadership, the I say jump, you ask how high, and that's it, and you go and do it. That sort of mentality of leadership and the immediate, like the decisive action, the lead from the front, first over the top, all these other cliches. But actually, the story I hear from quite a lot of people who've served is that only really happens in very limited, specific situations.
They're absolutely spot on.
And then most of the time that it's pretty collaborative and it's nothing like what most people would understand it. So I'm kind of curious, firstly, like, you've probably already answered this now, but was that your experience? And then secondly, given the length of time that you spent in the Royal Air Force, did you see like a shift or a change in leadership philosophy and the way it was done if you compare like the beginning to the end?
Yeah, I can say the effectively the end of the Cold War. There was lots of circumstances during that period of time when you were asked to do stuff, and the answer was always yes, and you got on with it and you did it. There was no question of sometimes even understanding why you're doing it. The person above you has said this needs to be done. Very autocratic environment, very, very, even to sometimes even when there was a slight consultation going on, it then became bang, autocratic. The person in charge said, this will happen. Wrong. The word will disappeared. The word shall controlled everything. Will being intention. No intentions, it all became a shall. I think that was a major step for me. Your personal training that you did with your nuclear bar, your NBC gear. How can I do this properly? Can I get my mask on properly? Can I decontam properly? Can I do a number 1 and number 2 without killing myself? And etc. Can I eat? Can I drink? And those self-drivers, right, in the shall world, I think there was a major change. One of the, I suppose, negative aspects for at my level was as the fleets of airframes and downsized, as our role got smaller and smaller, the top echelons didn't. So where there were times when you had a group captain with 3 wing commanders running a station with 4,000 people, you could get to the stage where on certain units with a certain squadron with 4 aeroplanes, there was group captains doing squadron leader jobs and people with rings on their arms. Don't get me wrong, there was never a what's what I'm looking for? Never a negativity around that, but it always got a bit hard to do. I think structural wise, for me, that was probably the only thing I could say that major change was when the Cold War went. We then ended up in, Gulf 1, Gulf 2, Bosnia, Kosovo. Leadership in a day-to-day environment, from my perspective, on a unit was as demanding as you wanted it to be, i.e., we had these annual inspections. My attitude was, why do I need an annual inspection for them to turn around and say you're doing your job properly? See, my feelings were we should be doing it properly all the time.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I found was proper record keeping. The classic what, why, when, how, and who. And those classics of having that recorded, if things were going to go proverbial, we've said it before. You and I, plan, provide, direct, and control. There's all these analogies around Mallow's hierarchy of needs when you're dealing with people, and there's mountains of it out there. And I said, going through some of your report, I thought, wow, there's a lot out there. But I found the major change for us, was the Cold War. The other aspect of you want me to jump how high type of thing, they come in environments where you're trying to keep people safe from something that you really don't know what's going to happen next. Simple little things like the welfare aspects. Are they watered? Are they fed? Are they comfortable? Have they got the gear they need? Those sorts of things. Because you really don't know what's coming next. Yes, they've all gone and done their general service training, or they've done their ground defense training, GDT as they call it. They've fired the gun, they've done this, they've done that, done all the other bits. But thousands and thousands and thousands of us are just there supporting the individual that's actually doing it out there. The classic with the Air Force, of course, is, we do all this amazing work and we strap one individual in an airplane and send him off to war, and we go and have breakfast. Yeah. So do you know what I mean? So, and when that individual comes back and he starts rah-ing, you listen. You don't take offense. You take it, you get it written down, and you sort it out. The next time you see him, sometimes they even come up and put an arm on his shoulder and say, sorry about this morning. But your answer to them is, no, not at all. Not at all. So it's understanding the release aspects. Am I making sense here? Understanding the release aspects. Understanding that sometimes when it is a shall environment, you just get on with it. And they're driven by the unknowns. That shall, it's the unknown bit. As you say, over the top. Come on, boys, we've got to get over the top. Oh, I know what's over the top. I said, it's the wrong thing to do. Why can't we go around the back instead of over the top? But that's how we are now, though. We won't go over the top anymore. We will work out the most effective and efficient way of getting there safely. And that's what I like about as I left, what I experienced, in that, because mistakes happen. You end up in a situation that you never, ever, ever, ever thought of. But don't forget your experience. Don't forget your training. Don't forget the basics. And that's, for me, the major changes is when the Cold War came. Well, I know I'm probably rambling a bit, but it was a change from will. It's a shall environment that was, and we changed to a will environment where it was intentions. Our intention is this, our intention is that. And until you end up then deploying into a sector of conflict or whatever, or even in your own environment, have an aircraft crash on the unit, somebody's got to be put in charge of picking up the bits and controlling the various other bits. So there is that focus on, I am in an environment, I am the leader, but I am going to do as I'm told in this environment, as opposed to what I think should be done.
That's interesting. And then, so, I mean, post-Cold War, so you left, 2007, I think you said?
I left 7, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's quite a busy period, 15, 20 years for the armed forces. From that moment of, like, when was it? Like the Berlin Wall came down in, what was it, 89, 90?
Around there, something like that, yeah.
Yeah. And then Soviet Union was over by 91, I think.
Yeah.
Testing way. It doesn't feel like modern history anymore, does it? Because it was like 30 years ago.
Yeah.
but in my brain, modern history, we're still talking 1970s. So, yeah, anyway. So, I mean, from that moment so that shift, as you said, from shall to will, was there like a further development, or is that how it stayed until you left?
Nothing really specific, because even though we're in a will environment, the shalls were still there, but you were taken out of the will environment and you knew you were in a shall environment, if that's the right way to describe it, as you stepped off the aircraft and when your foot hit the concrete, there was then the shall environment. But as I said, that's the only real way I could explain it.
Yeah. So it's context dependent, I guess, isn't it?
Yes, great. Yeah. Good word. Yeah, context, very, very much so. Very, very much so.
Yeah, which is an interesting concept in itself for leadership, I think. That sort of leads us into the next thing I wanted to talk about. I've just noticed the time as well. It's flying.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Completely lost track of it.
Yeah, very much so.
what's really interesting here, so like situational leadership, or like the context, being aware of it and allowing it to drive or decide your behavior as a leader, is something we talk about almost academically in sort of the leadership world, as I jokingly call it. But when I say that, what I'm thinking about is like leading a business. So the corporate world, the private sector.
Yep.
And it strikes me that with experiences you've had and a lot of the things that happen in the forces and the way that they work, there has to be lessons we can draw from that to make it more effective in the private sector, because it is largely an academic exercise, I think. So like for me in the private sector, contextual leadership is about the individual and being flexible and understanding that if you walk into any given office or company, you can't just have that sort of classic old school mentality of one size fits all. You know, it's only fair if everyone gets the same treatment sort of thing, particularly in a modern business, because it just doesn't work that way anymore. People are all different. Everyone brings their own challenges, skills, like advantages to work with them. Everyone has different home lives. Everyone has different things that are stressing them out or playing on their minds. So, you know, what might work for one of those individuals won't work for another. And so you've got to be a little bit flexible and adaptable, and you've got to bend with the context. I guess what I'm trying to get to is, what are the lessons on that subject that you think you could draw from your experiences that might be useful to someone struggling with this concept in the private sector?
For me, I think the major challenge that leaders starting out now in business is, how do you lead the individual who's working from home? How do you create the team environment when individuals within the team feel that they're, you know, I've got to pay $4,000 a year to get on a train to come to work every day, but he lives in the city and he can work from home. What's that all about? As a new leader, it's understanding your environment. And I think most importantly, understanding who you are and are there changes you want to make to be who you want to be. If you're comfortable with who you are, my main thing to a new leader is listen. Listen. And as I said to you earlier in our chat, if you've put yourself in an environment where you've learned something, ask yourself, have I actually learned this? Have I taken this on board? And to be fair as well to yourself as a new leader, individuals have seen things in you that have put you in that position to be the leader. So be very careful of questioning yourself all the time. Don't lose the confidence that got you there. Be in control of the confidence that got you there. That's what I would say. And again, listen. Listen and learn. That's how I would best answer what you just...
Yeah.
Curveball.
No,
You
it's
just
great. You just reminded me. So anyone who's been listening for a while will have heard this phrase before. And I always talk about, it was one of my mentors that I picked it up from. And it always has stuck with my mind pretty much since I met that person. So the phrase is, every day's a school day. And that person was you.
Yes. Yeah. It is. You never stop. And it all comes, I believe, from, there's a positive way, in my opinion, of questioning yourself. And there's a negative way. And that's back to what we talked about earlier, about the positiveness, negatives. Again, it's always been able to, like the shalls and wills. And as I said, every time you walk down the street, I look at people on their mobile phones doing this. And I feel like going up to them and saying, look, just take a step back, put your back to the wall so you can use your peripheral vision, while you're doing that, I guarantee you nobody's going to knock you over, pull your phone, do this, do that. And of always looking at creating that safe environment for everybody. And I think as well for a leader, as a new leader, if you come into an environment and you see something that is not right, and especially on that side of it, don't hold back. Better to be proven wrong than to be proven right by saying nothing. I think that's the other thing.
Absolutely.
Another saying.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, yeah, every day is a school day.
Yeah. Well, there we go. It's, I mean, that safe environment point is really important as well, actually. And I think this is something where, so again, like, I know we seem to be going around this a little bit and always comparing like private sector to the forces, but I think it is another really important lesson here. From the stories you tell and the experiences you've had, I think most leaders in the forces are really good at that safety aspect, looking out for your people, because they have to be by necessity, right? But I think that's something that not everyone in the private sector they're not quite with it yet. It's something they get, and we can talk about it in terms of like physical health and safety. And I think most companies are okay at that now because by law they have to be.
Well, they've got to, yeah.
But I think what's getting overlooked now in the private sector, and has been for a little while now, is the mental safety, the psychological safety, the mental health aspects even. And you can extend it to things like, hostile work environments, bullying, toxic cultures, all of these things. And I think there's a lesson I think that the private companies could learn. Let's put it that way. Because those things are just as damaging to people. It's just in different ways. And ultimately, like if we're being really brutally honest and mercenary about it, because companies are there for profits, aren't they, at the end of the day, your profits are suffering as well. Like if your people are unhappy, if they're stressed out at work all the time, if they're burnt out, if they don't want to be there, if they're not able to pick up on the opportunities as much as they might otherwise, you're doing damage to your business by not looking after that aspect of them and their safety at work. And it is about safety at work. I'm on a rant now. I'm going to stop.
Not at all. No, I see, for me, when I walked out at the end of let's say a working day, I didn't stop being a leader. Okay. Going into the mess for an evening meal, chatting to guys, going to a sports event in the evening in the gym or whatever, or you don't stop being a leader. Whereas I believe in the civic world is, I run the company, but the moment I walk out the door, I think there are a number who then their leader bit changes. At the lower levels, I think some people just walk out and switch off completely. That's the difference, the main difference, I think, between.
So that's really interesting. That is really interesting. So I think there are two things. Firstly, I think it's probably a little bit different when you live where you work, which you would have done at that point, I'm guessing. I can't imagine anyone in the corporate life wanting to live where they work, let alone being able to. But secondly, I think there's a balance to be had here, because there is an issue as well with, so I mentioned burnout, I mentioned stress, and there's an issue as well in not a lot, maybe not even a lot of businesses, but in some where there's almost like that predatory aspect of the business owner or the leader. And I use that word leader loosely in this context because it's not really leadership the way they're doing it. The boss, let's say, where they're expecting way more of people than they're entitled to. So whether that might be like, why didn't you answer my email at 1 a.m? Why weren't you ready to jump to, I don't care if you're not at work, I needed something, why didn't you answer? That sort of mindset. So there is a bit of an issue or a balance there, because the flip side of that as well is people expecting more of their leaders than is necessarily fair too. So at the end of the day, it is a job, right?
The-
Yes, you might be having some
yeah,
issue, but is that your boss from work's problem to do something about it?
and that is the classic. Is that as I said, I did work for all through my career with some really good leaders. I only ever worked for one boss, and that was SBS. Right, SBS was the only person I would class as a boss. All the others I worked with, and I was very, very fortunate. They were genuine leaders. And it didn't matter whether we were in a social environment, work environment, just meeting up, walking down the street. You know, there's that aspect to it. And I was very lucky. So I think, as you said, if there's a boss is not a leader. That's how I read it. So,
Wow.
all right.
That's the tagline of the podcast. So yeah,
I think so. There we go.
I guess where I'm coming from is, like, I've been in that situation where I was leading people where you can care too much and you can want to do too much for them.
Mm-hmm.
And what ends up happening is you exhaust yourself. So whilst it is like, end of the day doesn't mean you stop being a leader. And I agree with that, like, from a moral standpoint, like ethically and in terms of like identity and character as well. But I also think it's important to be self-aware and recognize your limits and not overextend and not be that person who is so exhausted and ragged all the time because 200% of their energy is spent looking out for other people. Because those little, like, as altruistic and as wonderful as those people are, they're going to live a lot shorter lives than the rest of us, I suspect.
Yeah.
Because they'll just burn out and they'll be gone.
Yeah. That side of it, I'm fully aware of that. But here we go. The one person you should always lead.
And this is where I was leading.
Yourself.
Absolutely.
Lead. So that I don't see that burnout. I don't see it, because at the end of the day, if you're willing to do that to yourself, that means that because you're having to spend so much time looking after the individuals around you, you've got a training requirement. You've got an aspect of they have to take responsibility aspects, all those things. So if you, as a boss, are burning out, you're not doing your job right, boss. I use the word boss. Okay, you're not doing your job right. Become a leader and lead them so that you don't end up burning out. All right. So that's where I come from. So the leader leads himself, but if you're in a boss mode, that's when it all goes proverbial up in the air. So if you've got your job right, they are not going to burn you out. They're not going to burn you out. And if you feel that coming, you find somebody within your team and you give them that responsibility to put the harm around that individual's shoulder and come back to you unofficially later on. How's it going in this aspect? Blah, 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 blah. Now it's all sorted out now. He puts his right foot in the right shoe and his left foot in the left shoe, as opposed to the way they were before. It's that side of things. So that's my answer to thee. You shouldn't, never burn out, because you lead yourself. And if you're leading the team right, you don't burn out.
It's a good answer. Yeah, it's a very good point.
it's again, I love this, is because there's an element of facts in certain things we say, but this is my approach. This is me. This is why I know the first thing I shall end up doing when the podcast is finished, I shall go downstairs, I shall grab myself a beer, and I shall get a book out from behind me, and I shall sit and enjoy a beer and have a read. And it's just because that be my switch it all off. Because I haven't had to think like this for donkey's years, to be fair. It's got, when did I retire? I retired when I was 69, so 5 years ago I retired from everything. That's when I shut my company down, and Jean and I had a when's enough? Am I content? I was finishing on a high with the job. I loved it. Good time to finish. Have we got what we need? We did the essential desirable list. Yeah, bang, time to go fixed income. Bye-bye, everybody. Switch the laptop off and go home. Leading yourself.
It's the way to think about it, I think. It doesn't seem like 5 years ago, though.
Crazy.
I don't know where the last 5 or 6 years have gone, to be honest.
Yeah.
Just blink and you miss it sort of stuff.
Very much so. Very, very much so.
Well, I mean, thank you for stepping out of retirement today to talk to us as well.
Well,
Much
when every day's a
appreciated.
Sunday, it's hard work, dear boy. It's hard work when every day's a Sunday, okay?
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, I think a couple more questions, and then, much as you know, I could keep talking to you for another 3 hours quite happily. I am conscious of the length of the episode and people sticking with it.
Yeah,
to the end.
Chop it down a bit, I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've given us some great stories already, actually, from your career. Like, were there any impactful moments in your career that you haven't talked about already that shaped your understanding of leadership?
Yeah, I think standing in front because I ended up going to Hereford, having gone through a GST2 course as a student, I ended up as part of the instructional staff on GST1, which was bringing the corporals through. And I think my first day stood in front of and seeing the attentiveness and the eagerness and of that group of 20, 25 students in front of you. And I'm stood there, as a sergeant in front of them. That was a really special moment for me. And then when that first group of students qualified, they have an end of thing bash and everything else, and you find that there's three of you there out of 12 instructors who've been invited along to say thank you to. I think that's special as well. I won't forget that. I don't forget that.
It's a pretty good answer. Yeah.
I'm very lucky to have had that experience, to be fair. Very, very lucky.
Yeah. I'd be remiss, I think, if we didn't have like a brief moment of geeking out about aircraft. Because behind you, for anyone who's not watching the video and they're only listening to the audio, behind you there's a picture on the wall of one and there's a row of models on top of a bookcase. So we covered the Hawk, I think. I can see, is that a VC-10, a TriStar?
Yeah, when I first joined up, as I said, the first aircraft I worked on was a Britannia and a Regulus. And it's actually the Britannia that's at Kemble now.
Okay.
They've got, right. So I worked on Britannias, VC-10s and Belfasts at Price Norton. Okay. I stepped off an aircraft in 1972 into Mazir in the Persian Gulf into the Gulf War. Our Gulf War, as in the Persian Gulf. It was just one of the secret wars that the country was involved in, Doha, etc. And I worked on turn spanners on Hercules, Vulcans, Victors, Nimrod R1s, Caribous, Skyvans, Strike Masters. Then I came back to UK. I ended up doing work on Buccaneer, the 1384 mod, changing the engine spectacles. Then from there, I ended up on Little Riz. So I was on Nats, Varsities, not Varsity, sorry. Varsity. The JP3 4s and 5s, just goes on, and then up to Valley, as I said, Nats and Hawks and Hunters. And then I did a basic engineering training as an instructor, teaching people to cut metal and rivet properly. Then from there, I got promoted to sergeant. I ended up down at Hereford on GST1, teaching GST1. I just all over. Aircraft wise, now it's really quite difficult. When I worked on Abingdon, we were doing major maintenance and wing changes on Hawks and stuff, but we also helped out on Jaguars and helped out on the Phantoms. and the Bucks when they came through now and again. It's all so different. It is so different nowadays. But the geekiness, I think, for me, my best geeky time was at St Athens doing the fuselage replacement project on Hawk, and then being asked to stay on afterwards and be part of the major maintenance aspect of that. In the same hangar that Jaguars and VC-10s were being ripped apart and rebuilt. I thoroughly enjoyed that bit. Then after that, I went back to papers and pens and decision making and watching other people doing what I'd asked them to do, saying my next comment to them was, well, guys, I didn't ask you to do it that way. And it didn't work, did it? So do it the way I've asked you to do it. No, but airframe wise, I loved my job. I think it's the best trade. You come out, you know pneumatics, hydraulics, structure, you know about fatigue, you know about stress analysis, you know about cabin conditioning, you know, all those sorts of things. So you can apply it in many different aspects when you come out. Many different aspects. A lot of guys, when they come out, they move away from the aircraft industry, but some of them become gas engineers, plumbers. They end up going into farm machinery world. You know, it's just, it gives you such an insight stuff. It really does. And I'd recommend anybody being a rigger, as the abbreviation is, airframe fitter. Good stuff. I rambled, sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's nostalgia, but I feel like aircraft back then had a bit more personality and realness to them than they do these days.
I mean, I sat in the jump seat, on the jump seat in an Andover. There's the left-hand seat, right? That's pilots, and there's a little jump seat in the middle. And you're sitting there as the techie that's on the trip that's going to turn the aircraft ready for its Gazomi trip and all the other bits. And we're going into Dubai Airport before it's like it is now. And as you're coming in, there's a crashed aircraft there. There's a pile of crap here, and you get in, you park up, blah blah blah. You kneel the airframe, so the back door ramps open. You kneel. It's one of those kneeling ones. All the rubbish off, and you look at the captain and say, right, Captain, how long have I got? He says, right, I want you back here by 4:30. We'd landed at, let's say, 10 o'clock in the morning. Got to be back here, aircraft turned, ready to go, 4:30. No problems at all. So I jump a taxi, end up down in Dubai into the souk, all right, with a big long list of stuff from all the guys, you know, getting all the stuff we can't get on Madeira Island and all the other bit. And they just memories just from on the sat there, being given a cup of coffee. Or tea rather, and giving this list, and there's all these people come running up with all the stuff, and you just go, yeah, I'll have that, I'll have that, I'll have that. Like Lord of the Land, you know, then you take the money out of your pocket and you pay him, and you pay him, and you pay him, you know? And then they bundle it all up and they carry it and put it in the taxi for you, and you get back to the airport and there's a little man who can run out, you know, a couple of basers, and he'll do anything for you. And you say, so you ring traffic up on your way, say, oh, I'm in taxi, yeah, okay. And you get permission to drive the taxi and park alongside the aircraft and throw everything out. And then you buggers, just different worlds to what it is now, for sure. That's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, Dubai is a really interesting place. We were there a few years ago, and we went, you know, we did the touristy things. You go up the Burj Khalifa and all that sort of stuff. But the photos they have of like aerial photos of like Dubai in the 70s. Did it even exist then? I don't know.
Totally different.
Dubai in the 90s and then Dubai today. And those last two photos, I mean, one was basically like 3 buildings. And then the other one was what it is today. In the space of like 25 years, throwing a city up the size it is today is ridiculous.
It's
like
just
the pace of...
Yeah, absolutely unbelievable. I mean,
it's hard to think of many other places in the world where something like that might happen. China, maybe, but...
Well, yeah, you're right, yeah.
It's,
I mean, I Doha, I mean, in 72, we fought alongside Iranian soldiers. You know, we lost 100 odd guys and everything. It was about 500 Army/Air Force on the ground, and I think we lost between 50 and 100 were killed. They lost, 2,000-3,000. I can remember going into Tehran overnight and just staying there, and the world as it was when I first joined up were everywhere. I mean, it was, but the places that there were to visit, and the Near East Air Force was still there, the Far East Air Force was still there. It was just fascinating, fascinating times. I'm not saying as it went through, it still was fascinating. I still don't understand how the Air Force is going to survive without the good old Fat Albert, but without the Hertz. But but that's the way it's gone.
A400, I guess, wasn't it?
Vive la difference. Vive la difference.
Yeah.
I'm going to end on a positive.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess that's time, isn't it? That's what it does.
Is. Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it was always right in my time either. So many different aircraft types. I mean, it stretched us, But then we had the industrial base to support it. Now you have to singular down, you reduce your role because of the support you're going to get. And if the only support you're going to get is from halfway around the world, all the just in time elements, all the bits of, we don't have storehouses full of kit anymore. It's all this just in time. So has the whole thing's changed? That's where part of my world is. Every day's a school day, because you have to adapt and change as those things change around you. And as I said before, as a leader, there's lots and lots of things as a leader you cannot control. You just have to manage the output of what's being sent to you, and don't fight it all the time. Accept that's as is. That is the as is. You now got your job now is to make it work. And I believe that's the difference between leadership and being a boss. Making it work.
Creating the environment for success.
Yeah.
Whatever that might look like. And I think that encompasses everything, doesn't it, that we've been talking about today. Looking after the people, etc.
Meeting up in the hole in the wall at Waterloo for a beer with a mate that I hadn't seen for 5 years. Perfect.
Was it really 5 years?
It's a long time,
Surely
buddy.
not.
No, it's been quite a while. It's been probably longer than that, to be honest. It was.
I'm sure we met up. It wasn't the first time since COVID. For sure it wasn't.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Because we met up with...
We did.
We met up with the other
Shepherd's
halves,
Market.
didn't we?
Yeah, Shepherd's Market.
And we went for lunch, didn't we? Because Claire and Jean came.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shepherd's Market, yeah.
Anyway, last question. You've been waiting for this one, I'm sure, because it's my favourite one. I'm interested to see what your answer is going to be, but it's called Leadership Heroes.
Leadership Heroes.
If you had to pick one person, but it could be literally anyone you could think of, so it could be alive or dead, past or present, real or fictitious, someone you've met, someone you've read about, anything, but someone who, in your opinion, would perfectly embody leadership. Who is that person for you and why?
Again, it's circumstance. Circumstance driven. Hard. I had something in mind, but during our conversations, my thing has changed. This is not. I'm not going to use the name either. This is not.
That's fine.
This is not anybody famous or anybody. It's from my experience. I worked for a group captain who I had to give certain briefings to, etc., and he would then go off round to brief the Air Vice Marshal or Air Commodore, depending on which way he was going in the command headquarters. And I remember having them briefed him. He said to me, right, I can't see that the boss isn't into there, blah, blah, blah. I want you to give him that briefing tomorrow. And that's the first time in a senior officer role where somebody had said, no, I'm just passing on what you've done. And I think, to me, as a leader, being able to know when to take a step back and then take the best person to do that. And history-wise, it probably won't be particularly popular. I saw Eisenhower as that individual. Never fought in a conflict in his life. But what he did was just phenomenal. And who he managed, if you look at Montgomery, I mean, he was the start of the success of to me of leadership. His style was in nowadays, oh dear. And even I think all these major players, like the Churchills of the world, and all that, they're Churchill, selfish, self-centered, but positive, focused, got people to do stuff that they didn't want to do, and it all worked out well in the end. And that whole aspect to me of where we've come from a negative, i.e. the First and Second World Wars, all the various wars we've had, the positives are, to me, we've still got thousands of people legally or illegally wanting to come here for whatever reasons, I don't know. But for me, I think that group captain who did that to me says a lot. And being able to accept that, no, I'm not the best man for the job. A bit like no, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, you're going to do, and develop that team. I think was amazing, absolutely amazing. There's 3 or 4 books behind it. I got all of the Churchill papers and stuff that I still read, and there's lots and lots of other really talented people who I believe have had an influence on how we are today. The list is huge, I think. But from a personal perspective, what that group captain did on that day taught me a lot in right person doing it. Yeah, I've told you, thank you very much. I agree with it. Now move on. You're going to do this. And as I said, for me, Eisenhower was good at that.
Yeah, Eisenhower's been chosen a few times before. I think he is a good one, but I think I prefer your personal connection one.
That's why I did that first. Yeah, that's why I did that first.
Because it speaks to one of the things that I think is the difference between modern leadership and, I hesitate to say old-fashioned, traditional, old school, whatever you prefer. And that difference is the removal of ego from the conversation, from the decision making. Because particularly in a situation like that, where, massively outranked you, it would have been very easy to just go, well, I'm in charge, so I'm going to take the credit. But he didn't.
And he started a trend because in my position as a chief technician, I'm sat outside the ranking officer's office, and there are 2 group captains and a wing commander sat there, and there's me sat there as a chief. I'm the first person who goes in. He says, Chief Vincent, boss, I go and give him my briefing, tell him what's going on, etc., etc. He thanks me a lot. And I wander back off and I go back to the office and get on with my job. Within a month, it was either flight sergeant, chief techs, sergeant, whoever was given all this up briefing. Instead of up briefing, they briefed, accepted that, yeah, fine, and then you were sent round to do the job. And I thought that was brilliant. That's probably one of the best. Not one of the best, but yeah, on the list of best experiences of leaders.
Yeah, I mean, the other big clue is that it's stuck in your memory this long as well.
Yeah,
You look back on that with fond memories, and you remember that feeling it gave you.
I do. Yeah. A very, very, very busy time. Could have done it like a hole in the head However, it meant something. It really did.
Which is the power of leadership, isn't it? There we go. Ending on a positive as well. It's like we planned it or something.
Yeah. Very much.
Well, Stu, like normally at this point in the episode, I would invite the guest to share it in their website or links or anything. But as you're retired, I guess there aren't any.
Nothing like that at all. No, nothing like that at all.
Yeah, I mean, I know you are on LinkedIn, though.
The only thing I would expect is a WhatsApp for the next time we're meeting up for a beer. That's about it.
Yes, well, you'll have that very soon anyway, because Christmas is just around the corner, isn't it?
Yeah,
so it'd be rude not to. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, look, thank you for today. Thank you for being on the show.
No, thanks. Yeah, I enjoyed it. It's really good.
It's so great to have you on here. And thanks also, I mean, I'm sure I've said this before, but thanks for the influence you've had in my career as well. It's been amazing. Like the things I've learned from you, even the small stuff, like your ability to stay calm when people are getting cross all around you. Like I've learned so much from that. And I wouldn't be in the position I'm in today without that. So thank you.
No, well, and you, we had good times. We had good times. It was. Because coming out from my experience into that world was, not easy at times. However, I just stepped back, watched, listened, and learned, which is brilliant. Well, thanks, Dave. Lovely. And I'm not going to wait. Don't wait too long for us to meet up and have that beer. Okay?
Absolutely. Stu, thank you again so much. It's always a pleasure talking with you. I think the listeners can probably tell that I got a bit lost in that conversation, which I always do. We go down the rabbit holes. We talk about interesting aeroplanes and interesting life lessons and leadership and all sorts. At least this time, it was perhaps a bit more lucid, as it wasn't conducted in a pub fueled by beer, as so many of our conversations, our best conversations maybe, some might say, always are. So thank you again, Stu. Listeners, viewers, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it's given you a bit of insight into my take on leadership and some of the things that Stu has taught me over the years. I'm sure it has benefited you, and I hope he's given you some ideas and some things to think about in your own application of leadership. So as I said at the beginning, nothing to plug. Stu's retired. He hasn't got a website. You can't really learn more about him. He is on LinkedIn. I'll tag him in some of the posts. So you can go and have a look, maybe drop him a message if you really want to. But aside from that, it's just my website in the show notes. Do pay us a visit if you'd like to learn more about leadership. And that's it. That's all I'm going to say, because this is the 200th episode event, and it's not about getting clicks or customers or anything like that. Just this once. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for all your support over the last 199 episodes. Thank you for listening or watching today. And I hope that you continue to get something out of this podcast. I hope it's useful for you, and I hope it's helping you in your career and leadership journey. Join me again on Friday for the final episode in our week of 200th episode anniversary celebrations on the podcast, etc. event. Yes. So I'll be talking with my next guest, Dr. Cynthia Benson-Mercer, about the 7-minute pivot, about human and leadership psychology, some of her several books, and more. Hope to see you there. Until then, as always, be a leader, not a boss.